Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those who have their natal sun in the 6th house. And this is the house that Virgo rules in the universal chart. It's the house of health and the daily routine. So organization is part of this, as well as pets and your service to the world. And so the sun is the aspirational self. I believe when a person is a child and, up until probably the first Saturn return, I really think that the moon sign and the rising sign are more in play than the sun sign in a lot of cases. I think we grow into our sun signs. And this is because the sun is the individual. And so when you're younger, you're encouraged to listen to your parents, listen to your teachers, and kind of go along with the program. And you find yourself as you get older. And so it doesn't matter what sign your sun is in. If it's in the 6th house, you're going to tend to be a perfectionist. You want to do things right. And that can lead to, what I would call like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder traits, where a person can never do it quite well enough. There's always a tendency to kind of like see the flaws in their own work, and also that of other people that they are evaluating, and also having that kind of a critical spirit where you see things in a very, it's like honing in on all the details, but sometimes noticing the flaws more than the the good parts of things. And this isn't due to negativity. Of course, if the sun is afflicted, it might veer more into the negative side of things, if you will. Or I really don't like to use positive and negative. I prefer to say what is harmonious and inharmonious. And so there's a desire to do things right and for others to do things right. And the ability to really see every little thing, catch details that other people miss. And this is actually very helpful. I think that in terms of professions, the secretary is one of the classic Virgo types of professions. And if you have the sun in the 6th house, you would have a similar bent, if not in the healthcare industry, because of the connection to health in the 6th house. By the way, with health, it can be more along the natural path than anything else. Of course, if people are just doing it for the purpose because they actually are interested in the area of health, they could become doctors, they could become nurses in mainstream healthcare industry. But I think that natural health is even more of a thing because Virgo is an earth sign, and so herbalism can be a part of the 6th house, and vegetarian diets or alternative diets, if you will. And so regardless of what your sun sign is in, you still might have this same type of kind of an emphasis in your life. And actually, speaking of emphasis, because the sun is aspirational and it is such, it's like everything revolves around it, you can make health, your life revolve around health. And so, sometimes we call the person a health nut, or maybe maybe it's more of like working out, where the person, they might have a very strict diet, but they also might be really into weightlifting or jogging or something like that. And that's just like the center of their existence, is their health routine. Routine is a big part of this. People who have the sun in the 6th house will tend to be organized. Even if your sun sign is in Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune, it's actually the opposite sign of Virgo. And it's actually the house of, I don't know if it's ever been characterized as disorganization, but it's the house of dissolving. Neptune is about fog and nebulous conditions. It's not a material place. It's an immaterial place. And the 6th house is a material place. It's an earth house. So it's very much about grounded things, including and tangible things. And this is why people who have the sun in the 6th house tend to value things that are useful. And even if you have a sun in Pisces, you will tend to have some of these traits like perfectionism and having a very well-defined routine, that you're very organized, and you may seem atypical. You may seem more like a Virgo than a Pisces. And this is one of the reasons why when people talk about their sun sign and it doesn't seem like it really matches who they are, they think that astrology is total bunk. And if only they knew how deeply it can go. It really does make a difference where your sun is at, which house it's in. And in the 6th house, you're all about business. You could be a workaholic. And there are certain signs that are already, veering in that direction of not already there, one of them being Capricorn, another being Leo. So if you have either of those signs as your sun sign, that just increases the possibility that you're going to be a workaholic. And, suffice it to say, if your sun is in Virgo, that's going to be a double Virgo influence. And speaking of work, the sun is our healthy ego, and it's our identity. And so when somebody has the sun in the 6th house, they identify with what they do. It's very interesting. I used 2 online sources to compile my list of these traits, and one of them was the Codex Astrology.com. It's a great resource. And the other one was the Astrology Place, and that one is a great one too. But Codex seemed to have, this is very slightly the case, but I mean, there was like a negative tinge to it, which I do not resonate with when it comes to the sun in the 6th house. So that was why I got a second opinion, and sure enough, it was more in alignment with my feeling. I feel that the sun in the 6th house is a person who values work. And Codex was trying to say that the person's ego can really get caught up in it, which I think that there's some truth to. I think that anytime you have your sun in the 6th house or the 10th house, which is the career house, you might tend to really be attached to that as who you are, and you use that to define yourself. But I liked what the Astrology Place said. They said life of service. And I really feel, because, the 6th house is a house of the servant. And it's how you serve others. Virgo is a humble sign, and that rules the sixth house. Virgo is not ostentatious in and of itself, unless, if a Virgo sun sign has lots of Leo inner planets or something, they may be more show-offy or a fire ascendant. But Virgo itself is, sticking its nose to the grindstone and, doing things that are constructive, that are productive, not trying to show off or anything like that. Now, the 10th house, like I said, because that's the career house, I think sometimes that is more likely the culprit of having potential pitfalls, because the person may feel like they have to represent something to society with, because it's like the top of the chart means that all eyes are on the person and identifying them, based on their career. And the sixth house is actually the work that you're doing. So it's not really even your job title as much as, I would say, the 10th house. But one thing that can happen is that if the person were to lose their job, or they had to take a leave of absence for some reason, that could be difficult, because they really need to be productive. And it's not so much, I feel like, identifying with the actual job title, but more with being productive. So especially around retirement age, that could be problematic, where the person feels like, if I'm not doing something productive, then I cease to exist. I don't have an identity. And interestingly, and I didn't remember seeing this in either one of the sources, but the sixth house is also the house of volunteerism. And so that can be the path that the person kind of goes into. So they might retire, but they might be the kind of person, you might be the kind of person that retires later than average because of that fear of not being productive. And then becomes this consummate volunteer. And sometimes I observe people who are volunteering, and you can tell that they get a lot from it. And I would say that somebody with the sun in the sixth house is really like, it enlivens them to serve. It doesn't matter. That's why I wrote down here, life of service over materialism, because I saw something to that effect. I put it in my own words, because I really feel like it's not about these other things. It's not about the status. I actually feel that somebody with the sun in the sixth house, if they were to lose their job and they got a temporary job somewhere and it was paying minimum wage, they would take that job, even if they were making a good living, because they just want to be productive. And there's a good work ethic that's associated with this. But it's not just a good work ethic, it's a good attitude towards service that propels them, or propels you to do that. When you're criticized based on your work, it really affects you, because again, you're identifying with what it is that you're doing, and if you're not appreciated, that can affect you even more than the average worker. Part of this, I feel, is because of that Virgo influence. Virgo is a perfectionist and critical, but not just towards others, towards themselves. And so there's a sense of perhaps inferiority that is inherent, and that is like very sensitive to criticism, because you're only all too aware of how imperfect you are. So you don't need somebody else to point that out, and it just makes you feel worse. So, like I said, a profession could be in the healing arts, especially if it's along natural lines. And I wrote down here teaching organization and productivity to others, because they had said something to that effect. So, you could be that person who organizes people's house. You could even be like a cleaning person, because you would be like a really great house cleaner. But also an organizer of homes. Those people that come and they change your closets and do all that stuff. And teaching it to others. Virgo is the sixth house is ruled by Mercury. So it has that communication connection to it. But it's going to be communication that has this connection to things like being productive, being organized, health, and things along those lines. And I think that one of the main things, too, is the sense of living life in a very orderly way. I think that this is kind of like the hallmark of somebody with the sun in the sixth house. So you may have very well-defined routines, and they could be like, you always have a certain time that you exercise, that you eat, that you and you have like a very well-defined diet that you kind of don't veer from. You're striving, you always have these goals in mind to be efficient. Efficiency is associated with Virgo in the sixth house, and so you're going to have this. Now let's talk about, what your sun sign is. If you're an earth sign, this goes along with this very nicely, because again, this is an earth house. So anything like health related is going to be something that you resonate with. The health connects the body. We're talking about physical health. So it's, earth signs are naturally acclimated to their bodies and the natural world. And, so food and diet and exercise and all those things is something that you just take to like a duck to water. But one more thing that I wanted to say is that pets are very healing. The sixth house is also about pets, and they can heal you, but I was even thinking that maybe this could be a profession of somebody who's a vet, and if you're doing volunteer work, working in an animal shelter might be something that is really appealing to you. But anyway, getting back to the earth signs, this is something that is very in alignment with who you already are. If you're an air sign, this can be something that you're able to, I think that air signs, this can be good also for people that want to communicate health matters to others. So if you are a writer who specializes in health, like maybe health journals, magazines, and so on, that can be very good. Or somebody who speaks on these issues, whether it's like a public speaker or just you have your own business that you are a consultant, because there's that intellectual connection with it. With fire signs, I think it makes you a lot less, fire signs can be very spontaneous, but unfortunately, spontaneity can also create a bit of disorganization and not getting things done. That, I think I mentioned the word efficiency with the sixth house. Efficiency is really an important feature here, because it's one thing to do work, but you want to do it with the least amount of effort. And so finding a way to kind of like organize time management, that's what it's called, is by being able to figure out when you're the most productive during the day, and being able to do things, maybe even saying, okay, I'm going to do most of my obligatory, or, my obligations I'm going to do in the morning. First thing, front load those, so that I have, in the time when I'm kind of like less motivated, which is like afternoon, I kind of get into this kind of a vibe that's more relaxed, then I will chill during that time, and, kind of organizing time that way. And I think that fire signs tend to be spontaneous, and therefore maybe they're not kind of like, they do things very impulsively. And this creates a person who is much more orderly in that sense. And so there's a good chance that you are more productive. And you may be more serious as a fire sign. Fire signs usually are very happy-go-lucky and like big kids. And you might be much more serious and more of a workaholic than kind of I'm not saying the opposite, like a slacker is what a fire sign is, but fire signs tend to like to have fun. And you might find that you're more interested in work than having fun, and maybe that is your fun. So that can kind of mute some of the more boisterous aspects of Sagittarius. And then for the water signs, I think that this can really enhance your healing capabilities, because you're adding intuitive gifts to this area of health. And so that can even bring in some of the shamanism, shamanic healing, or Reiki healing, where people who can sense energy can, which is kind of an intuitive gift, can use that for physical health even, and that can be quite good. And also just like being intuitive about what is the person dealing with. From what I understand, like some of these energy healers will put they don't even necessarily touch the person, but they're kind of like putting their hands over the person to see what, where the blockages are, and healing them that way. And that can be very helpful for being able to have that type of a career. Also, I would say, especially, you could be like a pet whisperer, where you are intuiting, you can read the mind of animals, telepathic communication with animals, and things like that. Did I cover all the elements? I think I did. Okay, that's what I have for the natal sun in the 6th house, and I hope that you enjoyed this. If you'd like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.